Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR podcast brought to you by racefortheprize.com. Let's talk about Atlanta Super Speedway Racing for the second weekend in a row. Trucks on track, Xfinity on track, and Cup on track. But first, go to racefortheprize.com. Get your hands on the March package, Fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet, all the DFS tools, AI tools, all that information. 14 races in March. Wow. $40. Now, if you buy March and you didn't buy February, I'll throw in Atlanta. So get that March package or get the $250 season deal. Save yourself some money. All right, Atlanta. Yes, it's a super speedway. Is it slightly different than Daytona and Talladega? Sure, but I'm not going to go into that. You can listen to other podcasts, break that down, and where drivers need to run and handling and tire issues. Plenty of content out there. We'll cover that ad nauseum. You just want picks. You just want strategy. You just want structure. Save you the time, and let's just get to it. Yes, the answer is, and it always is, stack in the back. But wait, no, I can clearly see on the screen that Austin Cindric led 23 laps and started inside the top 5. Stacking the back isn't going to work. And this is where I say what I always say, and it's been true in the past and in the present and the future. You just need to build a winning lineup. You don't have to bend over backwards and work yourself into a pretzel trying to build the optimal lineup. You're going to put yourself at much more risk. You will risk men cashing. And I'll break it down. So let's look closely at the optimal lineup. Obviously, Suarez, Bell, Reddick, Cindric, Logano, Haley. Haley's your cheapie. You can't get the top 6 drivers. Got it, check. Haley, last guy in at 50 fantasy points. That has generally been our cut line. That's the target score you're aiming for with your 6 picks in Atlanta races. Now, it migrates a little north in some of the previous Atlanta races, 53, 54. And we are dealing with a small data set. But with our past knowledge of super speedway races and enough being shown so far at Atlanta, I feel pretty comfortable. 50, 52 is where I'm targeting. So if we've got that number in our head, we can move forward. And then we start comparing, or at least breaking down the idea, because some people are going to want to argue you got to play a lap leader. And that's a fair case if you are trying to build the optimal lineup and taking on what I would argue is unnecessary risk. As we look at this Atlanta fall race, we can see 2 of the lap leaders don't make it in, Kyle Busch and Ryan Blaney. And they both earn solid finishes, although Kyle Busch doesn't get quite the finish that he needs. My argument is, and always will be, I'm just going to stack in the back, hope the chips fall in my favor, and not take the unnecessary risk. And my argument is pretty simple. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drivers right there that started in the back, finished up front, because it is a super speedway race. And there will be wrecks. And you can make movements at the end. And look, some people are going to say, I don't know, handling's an issue. There's going to be cars that are going to be better. But when you look at some of these drivers, Justin Haley running with an average running position of 17th. If we look at other intermediate track races, when does Justin Haley really run in the top 20 all day? I would make a strong argument that the top 30 cars, even back to top 35, all have legitimate shots. It's not like the old days where cars 30 through 40 really didn't have a chance. In the Gen 7 car, there's a lot of parity. Most of the field is on board. I don't know if I need to go the J.J. Yaley route, but we have seen J.J. Yaley be optimal in Atlanta races. A Rick Ware car can get there. A B.J. McLeod car, although B.J. McLeod did have some decent speed last season at super speedways, wouldn't completely rule him out. But pretty much everyone is on the table. And if everyone is on the table, then you just navigate towards the back. Now, back to what I was saying. The argument of, well, you need a lap leader. Let's just say we hot swap Cindric out of the lineup. It's very simple. We'll take 3 in the back here. Bam, bam, bam. We'll take Justin Haley. We'll drop in Carson Hocevar. You're only conceding 5 fantasy points. And, maybe he finishes a spot or 2 better in the race. The guy that finished 16th finishes 14th. He scores more than Austin Cindric. And then we got to swap in one more, which would be Stenhouse starting 27th. And now, at this point, you'll say, I think you're stretching a little bit and making a insufficient argument for stacking in the back, whereas it's clear you need to build a 5-1 lineup. You need to take that risk. And again, I don't mind. If you want to go 5-1, 4-2, 2 lap leaders, 1 lap leader, 1 guy starting up towards the front, 2 guys starting up. I'm not saying it's a completely crazy idea. What I'm making a case for is the cause that you can probably get away with stacking in the back. And we've seen it, and you can check it out in the past optimal lineups, all available in the Fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet at racefortheprize.com, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. So here's the thing with Stenhouse. And this is one of the nice features with using AI. I don't want to just look at numbers on a page. I don't want to just look at a blank spreadsheet on a page. I don't want to just use racing reference. I mean, it's not 2014 anymore. It's like going to a doctor and instead of having surgery, he's still using leeches. We need to use better tools. We need to use more information. We've got to be ahead, not behind. It's 2025. And so one of the neat things about using ChatGPT and loading a bunch of information, lots of transcripts, notes, scraping hundreds of sites, is we can get a little bit more context and make better cases for our strategy. And so here in defense, you're probably saying to yourself, sure, you got guys starting in the back and scoring fantasy points, but this is just not enough. 43.8, you're not going to win. Well, how close was Stenhouse in that race? Do you know? Do you remember? Does your tout remember? This is a website that you subscribe to. Is he going to tell you what Stenhouse did? I'll tell you what Stenhouse did because I got my best friend, ChatGPT, helping me out. And so Stenhouse finishes with the 12th most fantasy points, 43.8, finishes the race in 14th, starts 27th, $6,700. Not bad, but if you are able to break down the races, you'll see how close this actually was. Stenhouse was running before the last caution in 10th place. He finished in 14th place. So if he just maintains that position before the last caution, you can add 8 points there. Boom, he's up to 51 fantasy points. That's how close it was. But instead, again, getting a little bit more analytical and adding context, ChatGPT, breaking down the information via transcript and NASCAR notes that Stenhouse, on that final restart, got caught battling 3 wide, got shuffled out. That's the way it goes. At least he still finished the race. Very close. So if he doesn't get shuffled out, he moves up, and then we're not even having this conversation. And everyone's saying, stack in the back. And this is almost always the case as we go back through some of these Atlanta races. We don't really have to make this argument at Daytona or at Talladega as often because it just seemed to be more volatile, and it really just is give me all that place differential. But we have seen lap leaders get up here and run maybe sometimes a single file race because handling matters and maybe you guys take it easy. We do also have fuel mileage that plays in and guys running a little less throttle, and so we can see a driver lead a lot of laps. But even in that case, there's no guarantee that that driver that leads a lot of laps gets a good finish. I mean, think about this. You're building lineups and you do the amazing job of accurately predicting the driver that's going to lead a lot of laps. But then he forfeits all of those because he doesn't get a decent finish. Austin Cindric, 23 laps led points, but then finishes 10th. Kyle Busch gets you 6th, but finishes 7th. Sure, Blaney would work, but just doesn't score enough fantasy points. I feel like Blaney should have had more than that. No fast laps. But, yeah, he started too close to the front. Just didn't get any place differential. Meanwhile, you can just go stack in the back. Let's look at the spring race again as we wrap up. I think this is all you need to know, really, right, folks? Stack in the back, build the winning lineup. You don't have to build the optimal lineup. So we look at the spring race, the race where Suarez won by split seconds, whatever. Here it is again. There's your cut line of 53 fantasy points. Do we have a lap leader in Ryan Blaney? Yes, we do. And yeah, it is worth noting that we have seen specific drivers run pretty well at Atlanta. There may be a little something to that if you want, but my first approach is, and always, is stacking the back rather than driver and track history. But we go again here, and we see 23rd from Suarez to first, 27th again from Stenhouse. This time he does get to finishes 6th. Chastain 21-7, Bubba 18-5. Now you do have two drivers starting inside the top 10 who lead laps that are optimal. Yep. Again, you can make a definitive case and a strong cause for starting drivers up front and taking that risk and hoping that they lead laps and also secure a top 5 finish. Also helping these drivers is they're a little closer to 10th and not quite in the top 5. But again, you didn't really need to take that risk. Blaney scores 55 fantasy points. I mean, that's an awesome pick that you make. Same thing if you were able to, select Austin Cindric. Great, you identified a fast car, you led a lot of laps. But even in doing so, you picked the guy that scored the 3rd most fantasy points. You picked the guy that scored the 6th most fantasy points. It's not like you picked a dominator or hog at an intermediate track, because when you accurately select those, they score 50 fantasy points more than anybody else. And it absolutely wallops the field. And you have to build around that. Here, Cindric scored barely 2 points more. No, not even 2 points more than Ty Gibbs starting in the back. Same thing for Corey LaJoie, starting in the back. Kaz Grala, starting in the back. If Kaz Grala can score the 9th most fantasy points, virtually everyone is on the table. Daytona, Talladega, Atlanta. Don't think you really need to make a big deal out of this and rack your mind over, but this one's different. Actually, no, it's pretty much Daytona again. That's how I would approach it. You don't have to. If you want to overthink it, that's fine. But I've looked at enough stats, information, and context to come away with the feeling that I'll just stack in the back. I didn't need Blaney. I didn't need Bubba Wallace or Austin Cindric. I could just go to several of these. You even got Chase Elliott starting 28. You got Carson Hocevar starting 35th, scoring plenty of fantasy points. I'll just quickly throw up some of the previous ones. And, well, actually, I mean, even, there you go, fall 23, Atlanta. Pretty much a stacking back. Now, you're not playing guys in the 30s, but that's not to say you can't. But you're clearly hammering place differential. 17 place differential for Byron, 24 for Suarez, 16 for AJ. There it is. So, in every one of these races, you can build a very good winning lineup just taking drivers in the back. Here you got LaJoie, Gibbs, and Eric Jones. Now, we do have some drivers up here in the top 10, top 15. But again, you just take a couple steps down, and here we are, just a few fantasy points lower than the cut line. So that's my argument. Hopefully this has been helpful. I know it's a quick podcast, but it's a back-to-back Super Speedway week. What else needs to be said? Stack in the back, build a winning lineup. If you want to be bold and try to take a lap leader, I wouldn't fault you. If you want to be bold, and I mean, you could even get a lap leader that starts deeper in the field. But really is, do you want to be bold and take a driver starting in the top 10, assuming that drivers in the top 10 are more likely to lead laps? And we have seen, for the most part, laps led going to that guy, but he's not really crushing the scoreboard. And even when Cindric crushed the scoreboard, he didn't end up with a lot of fantasy points. So that'll be a wrap. RaceForThePrize.com, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. $250 for the season, $40 for March. If you buy March, you didn't have February, I'll throw Atlanta in there with you. Thanks for joining me, guys. It's been a blast so far. Trip the Light's fantastic.